When Nazi Germany annexed part of Czechoslovakia in 1938, the world believed to witness a gigantic political crisis. Germany argued that it had to protect the German-speaking population in the so-called Sudetenland. But no one thought that the world just witnessed the prologue of a second, devastating world war that will cost millions of lives. The similarities to today are deeply concerning. With every day, Russia's war in Ukraine looks like the exact same first chapter to a bigger, global conflict. Just look at the signs. Why is Poland building tank barriers on its eastern border? Why do we see fundamental changes of policy all over the world? Why is absolute critical infrastructure under attack? It seems like every political actor, every side, even the public, gave up on the hope of peace. NATO is scrambling to form its first line of defense. But what if I tell you that NATO has not the capability to defend all its member states? And what if I tell you that NATO never planned to do so? In the middle of the NATO alliance sits an enclave, a Russian fortress, that could be the Achilles heel of the alliance. The most militarized place in Europe, splitting the seemingly unified alliance in two halves. In this video, we will talk about NATO's plan to wage a war far bigger than the war in Ukraine, why not everyone can be saved, and what we can observe on the ground right now that hints to the fact that peace seems no longer to be an option. Step by step, we put together the puzzle pieces to see that the world is sliding into a global war, to see that World War III is not the most unrealistic future scenario anymore, to acknowledge that our situation is dangerous, out of control and unpredictable, and to map out the plan the Western Alliance has to answer to the situation. The moment to stop this conflict lies in the past. The path our leaders chose is the path of war. Let's take a look at NATO battle plans and our possible future. And welcome to Dark New World. Back in the Cold War, the front line between East and West was located in the middle of Germany. Back then, the region was considered the primary battleground for a potential conflict with the Soviet Union. With the enlargement of NATO in the past 25 years, this battleground moved east. Today, the front line sits in Ukraine. But the official NATO border is in Poland. Here we can observe a country which is supporting Ukraine wherever it can, and a nation that is preparing for war. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Poland became a key member of NATO regarding its eastern flank and posturing against Russia. More than 7 million Ukrainians have crossed the Polish border as refugees. Today, Ukraine and NATO allies rely on Poland for the delivery of weapons and humanitarian supplies to Ukraine. Since the end of the Soviet period, Poland has been a strong supporter of Ukrainian independence and democracy. Polish national security strategy includes support for Ukraine's further involvement in European security arrangements. This is important for Poland to counterbalance the influence of the Russian Federation. Poland is a NATO state in an exposed position within the Ukraine war, which partly explains why it is so proactive in providing military support for Ukraine and is pushing other allies to do more. The interesting part is how far Poland goes when it comes to deterrence and preparation. The government ordered its military to build tank barriers and other fortification on its northern borders. The Polish defense minister had said that Poland is ramping up its security measures on its border with Belarus and Russia's Kaliningrad. Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak wrote on Twitter that we have started a preemptive expansion of security measures on the border with Russia and Belarus. This is part of our defense and deterrence strategy. The first fortifications are already being placed on the border with the Kaliningrad Oblast. Placing elements like this is not just part of political messaging. The measures are far beyond anything that would include political motives. Preparing these barriers are an indication that the Polish government cannot rule out the danger of escalation. And if they decided to go ahead and prepare their borders, well, maybe they know a couple of things that we don't. When it comes to NATO's plan to fight a war against Russia, the Baltic states are of critical importance. In case of all-out war with Russia, NATO would in fact lose territory there. In a recent interview, the Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, claimed that under current NATO defense plans, her country would be wiped off the map and its capital, Tallinn, razed to the ground. The plans, she said, envisioned that Estonia and other Baltic states would be initially overrun, but retaken 180 days later. She noted the scale of destruction that Russia had managed to inflict in Ukraine in the first 100 days of the war, and asked the alliance to change its strategy to one which provides for the defense of every inch of its territory. She's right. Estonia is the most exposed of all NATO countries to the risk of a Russian attack. It has a population of only 1.3 million and a 180-mile frontier with Russia. Around 30% of the population are ethnic Russians, most of whom were deliberately settled there during the period when Estonia was forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union. Many live in the northeast of the country, around the city of Narva, which lies right on the Russian border. What makes the situation even more difficult is that Russia has a secret strategic weapon. Well, not so secret if you know what I'm talking about. In the middle of Europe lies a Russian enclave, Kaliningrad. This city is the most militarized zone in Europe. The location can cut off NATO troops to the northern part of Russia and the Baltics. In the immediate post-war period, the Soviet Union established a formidable, closed enclave in the former East Prussia, including a large naval port at Kaliningrad. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the independence of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania deprived the new Russian state of major ports on the Baltic Sea, and 15,000 square kilometer Kaliningrad Oblast between Poland and Lithuania was cut off from Russia. When Russia insisted on maintaining Kaliningrad as a heavily armored garrison, it aroused considerable international criticism, especially from Poland. Kaliningrad is the main base of the Baltic Fleet, which has been strengthened in recent years. And naturally, there's an Air Force base in Kaliningrad, where bombers are based. Kaliningrad is home to one motor rifle brigade, one motor rifle regiment and the Baltic Fleet Marine Brigade. Both the Marines and the Rifle Brigade are now at full capacity after the 2008 army reform. Kaliningrad has new S-400 SAMs, which have a theoretical range up to 450 km. The current anti-aircraft missiles allow much of Poland and likely Latvia to be covered. With long-range SAMs, even Gotland and much of the Baltic Sea could be covered. In case of an invasion of Russian forces in the Baltics, NATO has somehow to conquer this fortress. Between the Russian enclave, northeast of Poland, and the Russian mainland sits the Suwalki Gap, the only direct connection to the Baltic states from mainland Europe. This small corridor is the only physical connection between the Baltics and the rest of NATO. It would be easy for Russia to cut the gap in the beginning phases of the war. In order to really reinforce a NATO presence there, military leaders would first have to figure out how to capture the fortified region and the city itself. Russia would garrison a significant number of troops there, because of its important strategic location and the base of its Baltic fleet. And we didn't even start to talk about nuclear weapons. In case of a nuclear escalation, Russian nuclear-tipped missiles wouldn't need more than 2 minutes to strike Berlin or Paris. The Russians would fight fiercely to defend this city. And NATO troops would have to fight through the urban environment to reach the Baltic insurgent forces in the north. With a high number of Russian defenders in mind, and the two sides frontline corridor that would form, the casualties would be in the tens of thousands, if not higher. At the moment, there is only a skeleton crew present in Kaliningrad. Since Russia first launched its invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has been peeling military forces away from its bases in northern Europe to plug gaps in its forces, suffering high losses and battlefield setbacks against Ukrainian troops. Of an original estimated 30,000 Russian troops that once faced the Baltic countries and southern Finland, as many as 80% of them have been diverted to Ukraine, according to 3 senior European defense officials in the region, leaving Russia with only a skeleton crew in what was once its densest concentration of military force facing NATO territory. In case of a widening of the conflict, Russia would reinforce this position to counter any NATO troop buildup in Poland. But there are already NATO troops in the Baltics. Though NATO has 4,000-man strong main battle groups stationed across the region, Baltic political leaders and military planners argue that much more would be needed to deter a Russian aggression. The US and Germany long cautioned against such a move, in part because of a 1997 accord known as the NATO-Russia Founding Act, in which the alliance agreed with Moscow not to establish permanent bases in the new member states in the current and foreseeable security environment. Russia's attacks on Ukraine, however, has convinced even long-time skeptics of what NATO calls forward defense in Eastern Europe that the time has come. For now, fighting is only happening in Ukraine, but our time is running out to stop this conflict from escalating into something bigger. Under no circumstances is there an option in which one party wins without triggering a wider conflict. The only thing that could save us from that scenario would be peace talks. But unlike other conflicts, protests in the West and Russia had been rather weak. 1 year ago I started this YouTube channel with a video called "The War in Ukraine will lead the world into a dark future." And 1 year later, this video still holds up, unfortunately. But I would like to thank everyone who is part of this channel for all the support. It was an incredible year. I like what I do, and even though I don't have much time besides my job to produce these videos, I can see that they are slowly improving in quality. I have big plans for this channel, and I hope you will stay with me for the next year, probably full of concerning stories about our dark new world. If you want to support me, then please like this video and subscribe. In this video, I talk about the fall of the West, and on the right, I talk about the collapse of South Africa. My name is Dennis, thank you for watching and goodbye.